ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, Banjul, Monrovia, and Accra, 1 p.m. in Abuja, Porto Novo, and Niamey. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Gambian Parliament rejects 2024 draft constitution at second reading stage after failing to meet the required 75% threshold for approval.
Having carefully examined the result of the division and acting in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the standing orders, I am compelled to rule that the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia Promulgation Bill 2024 has not met the constitutional threshold for passage at this stage. The bill is therefore negative and shall not proceed further.
Guinean lawyers extend nationwide strike by 2 weeks over unmet demands. Togo's public prosecutor launches investigation into death of 7 people during protests against government in late June.
When the public prosecutor opens an investigation, he must commit to publishing the findings of his investigation.
Liberian war victims demand compensation following President Bouakai's public apology. Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Christopher Aticho with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in the sub-region and beyond. This edition of Newslink begins with latest development from the Gambia, where the National Assembly has rejected the 2024 draft constitution during the second reading stage on Monday. The decision marks another setback in the country's efforts to reform its constitution. Out of 56 members of parliament, 35 voted in favor of the promulgation bill, while 21 voted against it, failing to meet the required 75% threshold for approval. Consequently, the bill has been officially rejected. This is the second time the parliament has blocked a draft constitution at the stage, following a similar rejection of the 2020 draft constitution. The Gambian pursuit of new progressive constitution remains unresolved. Sankole Janko reports.
The Gambia's long-awaited 2024 draft constitution has been rejected by the National Assembly, marking the second failed attempt in just 4 years to replace the 1997 constitution. The debate reached its climax late Monday evening after several hours of tense exchanges and impassioned arguments from both sides of the aisle. In wrapping up the opposition's case, Minority Leader Alhaji S. Dabo expressed deep mistrust in the intentions of the majority, casting doubt on calls to advance the bill to the Constitutional Committee.
You viewed on the 2020, rejected it. Today, others are viewing on the 2024, personal attack on them, and you are telling us, let's go to the consideration stage, and we try to compromise. You mean the ones who say that we cannot trust you if you should go beyond this level? You are vindicating them.
Majority Leader Billy J. Tunkara, in response, made a final plea to opposition lawmakers, urging them to rally behind what he called a historic opportunity to reshape the country's democratic future.
So I am calling all and sundry, and also I'm calling on the leadership of the Marine Caucus to reflect on these submissions, convince its membership to really accept this thing to go to the next level. We are more than willing to cooperate and listen to your concerns so that we incorporate.
But despite his efforts, the bill ultimately failed to garner the required support. Out of 56 lawmakers, only 35 voted in favor, falling short of the 75% supermajority needed at the second reading stage. Speaker of the National Assembly, Fabakary Tombonjata, announced the results with a sense of finality, confirming the bill's rejection.
Having carefully examined the result of the division and acting in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the standing orders, I am compelled to rule that the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia Promulgation Bill 2024 has not met the constitutional threshold required for passage at this stage. The bill is therefore negative and shall not proceed further.
Opposition members from United Democratic Party, along with independent MPs mainly from the Fonyi region who remain loyal to former President Yahya Jammeh, voted overwhelmingly against the draft, tipping the scale. The 2024 draft was seen by many as a crucial step towards democratic consolidation, setting a cap on presidential term limits, judicial independence, and expanded civil liberties. But on Monday night, those hopes were once again put on hold. The Gambia's long journey toward a new constitutional framework continues, uncertain and deeply political.
Sankole Janko filed the report. We will be having more details of that particular development during the second half of the news on the guest interview segment. But crossing over to Guinea for some legal matters, lawyers have renewed their strike across the country for additional 2 weeks. The decision was made on Monday during an extraordinary General Assembly held at the Bar Association headquarters. The striking lawyers dressed in black robes are calling for investigation to identify those responsible for the kidnapping of their colleague Mohamed Traore. As part of demands to conclude their protest, they are seeking a direct meeting with the transitional president Mamadou Diomboya. Abdoulaye Hassan has the details in the following reports.
Various courts and tribunals in Guinea will remain closed for another 2 weeks as lawyers on Monday decided to extend their strike. This decision is made in solidarity with their colleague Mohamed Traore, who was kidnapped recently and was later released. Musa Jallo, a member of the Guinean Bar Council, reiterated the lawyers' demands for investigations to identify those responsible for the abduction.
Over the next 2 weeks, we will hold another extraordinary General Assembly to see what has evolved since today's assembly in the sense of the security that we claim.
In the previous week, following the kidnapping of lawyer Traore, the head of government and the Minister Secretary General at the Guinea presidency met with a delegation from the bar to seek a resolution to the crisis. However, according to Musa Jallo, the situation remains unresolved.
So discussions have taken place, but it must be said that none of them have resulted in what we are hoping for. Because what we want to make clear to each and every one of you, the cause that is brought about is not the cause of Mohamed Traore. It is the cause of the security of the lawyer in the practice of his prophecy. What happened to Mohamed can happen to any of us. So it should not be that people think that the order leads to a fight. No, the order leads to a fight for the security of the exercise of the profession of lawyer in the Republic of Guinea.
As this situation continues to unfold, ordinary citizens and prisoners in various detention centers across the country are being significantly affected by the paralysis of the judicial system in Guinea.
Abdoulaye Hassan with that report filed in by Chiano Alpha Ibrahim Baudi from Conakry. Back here in Senegal, reactions continue to trail Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko's recent remarks regarding the Supreme Court decision to uphold his defamation conviction. The latest response comes from the Union of Magistrates of Senegal, UMS, which has rejected a request to hold a meeting with the Prime Minister. Their dissatisfaction arises from the fact that Sonko has not retracted his statement made on July 1, 2025, which has been termed inappropriate. One of Sonko's advisors, with his approval, had attempted to facilitate a reconciliation between the Prime Minister and the Magistrate Union. Augustin Colley has the details in this report.
An official from the Prime Minister's office, who is a member of the Union of Magistrates, Alassane Ndiaye, sought to initiate a meeting between Ousmane Sonko and the Union of Magistrates for an explanatory section. However, reactions were heated as some magistrates demanded a public apology from Ousmane Sonko before any meeting can take place. Meanwhile, a major question arises in this contest. Will the head of government issue a public apology to the judiciary? Senegalese political analyst Professor Golgi Jeng provides a response.
The Prime Minister will never go to the magistrates and say sorry. That is not in his personality and he won't do it. I don't really expect him going to the association and then say, I'm sorry. And even if he does this, the harm has already been done.
The current stalemate indicates a toxic climate between the executive and the judiciary. This tension could continue for the next 4 years if dialogue between the two branches of government does not occur. In this regard, Professor Jeng says,
in Senegal, the executive has been trying to control the judiciary since independence. The judiciary have been fighting to be free. And I am under the impression that what is happening shows that the judiciary is ready to play the role as a power separate from the executive. We have got to respect the rule of law. We have to respect the Constitution. No power has a right to try and dominate the other one.
On last Tuesday, Senegal's Supreme Court upheld the defamation conviction for Prime Minister Sonko, rejecting Sonko's request for an appeal that was based on former technicalities. The Pastef leader was convicted of defamation after he insulted former tourism minister Mambai Yang and was asked to pay a fine of 200 million CFA francs in damages to the former minister. The defamation verdict prevented Sonko from running for president in Senegal's last presidential election. Despite the court confirming the decision, the Pastef leader said the case was not yet closed on his side and that he will once again appeal.
Augustine Colley filed the report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Moving on to Togo, the public prosecutor has launched an investigation into the death of 7 people during protests against the government in late June. Civil society and human rights organizations are urging the prosecutor to clarify the circumstances of this case and, most importantly, make the finding of the investigation public. Emo Edits reports.
Following 3 days of protests against the government on June 26, 27 and 28, 5 bodies were found in 2 rivers within the capital Lomé. While the government claims the deaths were caused by drowning, the opposition and civil society blamed the protesters' death on law enforcement. Nathaniel Olympio is a civic activist calling for an end to the current regime.
When the public prosecutor opens an investigation, he must commit to publishing the findings of his investigation. This isn't about trying to calm things down by stalling, but rather about preserving the lives of the Togolese people. 7 people are still dead and many others are injured. We can't continue like this.
The Togolese Association of Torture Victims, which denounced the repression of the protests at the end of June, is asking the prosecutor to question the responsibility of the security forces deployed to maintain order during those days. Atioli Kao is the president of ASVITO.
First and foremost, the security forces must be held accountable for their actions. Those who bloodily repressed the protesters must be identified and brought to justice to answer for their actions.
In its investigative report published late last week, Amnesty International called on Lomé to investigate the cases of death, injuries, as well as arrests and ill treatment allegedly inflicted on demonstrators by law enforcement during the protests.
A report by WADR's correspondent in Lomé, Sylvie Wadr, and voiced by Emo Edits. Let's turn attention to Ghana, where the Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, has highlighted a concerning trend in its inaugural Democracy Capture report. This report reveals how democratic institutions across Africa are being quietly undermined from within national systems. It indicates that state agencies are increasingly being manipulated by political and economic elites to serve their own narrow interests while maintaining the appearance of democratic governance. From Accra, WADR's Nadi Ditete has the details.
A new report by CDD Ghana is exposing what experts call one of the greatest hidden threats to Africa's democratic future: democracy capture. The Democracy Capture Report, based on research across 370 state institutions in countries including Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Senegal, and South Africa, reveals that over 60% of public agencies are already showing signs of elite control. Dr. John Osai-Kwapong is one of the authors of the report.
It occurs when a few individuals or sections of a supposedly democratic polity are able to systematically appropriate to themselves the institutions and processes as well as dividends of democratic governance.
The research shows that lesser-known regulatory and implementing agencies are especially vulnerable, with many falling under elite influence behind closed doors. In several countries, including Benin, DR Congo, Senegal, and Nigeria, presidents were identified as the key perpetrators. However, Business people and influential individuals outside of politics also play a significant role. Dr. John Osai again.
The top 3 institutions or agencies vulnerable to future and continued capture: policy making, vertical accountability, and implementing. The worrying finding here is that your vertical accountability institutions, because those include your civil society organizations, your media.
While some countries are perceived as more vulnerable to the erosion of democracy, the report emphasizes that no country is immune. The Democracy Capture Report calls for urgent reforms to strengthen institutions, ensure transparency, and protect democratic processes from elite manipulation. CDD Ghana says without immediate action, Africa's democratic progress risks being quietly undone, not by force, but from within. For WADR, Nadi Teti, Accra.
You're still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. We are also live on Facebook at WADR English Service, as well as YouTube at WADR News. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Gambian Parliament rejects 2024 draft constitution at second reading stage after failing to meet the required 75% threshold for approval. Guinean lawyers extend nationwide strike by another 2 weeks over unmet demands. And Togo's public prosecutor launches investigation into the death of 7 people during a protest against the government in late June. Still ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let me take you to Liberia, where victims of the country's civil wars are seeking reparation following a recent public apology from President Joseph Boakai. During the weekend, President Boakai launched a national healing and reconciliation program, urging family members of victims to let go of the past. However, according to Dr. Aaron Weah, a transitional justice scholar, this initiative aligns with the legal framework established by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, which includes recommendations for victims' reparations that have yet to be implemented. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
According to Dr. Aaron Weah, victims are entitled to prompt reparations under international law and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Act. He noted that the victim groups, such as the Liberian Massacre Survivor Association, are actively mobilizing and strategizing to engage the government on the issue of reparations. The transitional justice scholar raised important questions regarding the nature of reparations, especially considering that victims are now older men decades after the conflict.
The act that established the TRC calls for recommendations on reparations to be granted by the government. The report captured clearly recommendations for reparations, but it hasn't been implemented over the years. So the request for reparations by victims will be well within their rights to make that call. The victim groups are mobilized. They are, in fact, excited about the apologies granted by the president last week.
Meanwhile, Samuel Kai, survivor of the Civil War, expressed deep concerns about how war victims in Liberia are being left to struggle with little or no assistance from the national government.
We can be passing around hopeless and we don't get anything to do. Some people lose their whole family. They don't know where to start from and so on. Some people lose their children. Some women that were raped from that. They got crippled and so on. And they all around here. So they also need to look in that direction. There should be reparation program for the war victim. That program should be here to cater to the war victim.
As Liberia moves forward, addressing the needs and rights of war victims is seen by many as a crucial step toward achieving lasting reconciliation and justice. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's still stay a while longer with Abraham Parker in Monrovia for the press review.
Welcome. This edition begins with the independent newspaper. Senator Dillon and Public Works Minister Cooper Kirk in clashes. Work permits face-off intensifies. Simeon Freeman wants a 10 reduction, SARS presidential and others. The next stop is the Daily Observer newspaper. Moncoffin now certified for carbon credit project, but EPA had no say in the process. That's a calling to the Daily Observer newspaper. State on this paper, Chamber of Mines lost government of Liberia for US $1.8 billion having whole Atlantic deal. Well, there are concerns as it relates to this story. Opposition figures have taken to their social media pages to criticize the government. A disclosure was made by the government in 2024 that the deal was worth $5 billion. It has been reduced to $1.8 billion. The government of Liberia did announce this deal. It took the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia to formally announce this deal. Critics have said the deal, in fact, was signed on the Sunday instead of the working normal days. Some critics have said the president is being pressured to sign this deal before his departure to the U.S. And the last stop on the Daily Observer, Ministry of Health launches campaign against infant mortality. Our next stop is the Heritage newspaper. President Bouaka to deliver keynote at a landmark U.S.-Liberia Business Summit. Metal steel victim's wife cries out amid corporate abuse allegations. 20,000 coach burst at Bow Waterside. Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency takes down 2. That does it for this Tuesday's edition of Press Review from Liberia's capital, Monrovia. Thanks so kindly for listening.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim Parker, for the press review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
A guest interview takes us to Gambia, where the National Assembly has rejected the 2024 draft constitution during the second reading stage on Monday. The decision marks another setback in the country's efforts to reform its constitution. Our guest is Madi Sise, National Assembly member for Serekunda and the chairperson for the Human Rights and Constitutional Committee of the National Assembly.
Mainly or principally is that most progressive clauses that we expected were really not in the 2024 draft. Example, the vetting of presidential appointments of key positions, the likes of the Auditor Generals, the Inspector Generals, the chairpersons of various commissions. These are key institutions that should be independent. So to leave that entirely in the hands of the president to appoint them and sack them anyhow he wants is a concern. And the other thing is we have seen in the 1997 Constitution where the president has the powers to nominate 5 people as MPs in the National Assembly. And these 5 people, by the same constitution, the leadership of the National Assembly should come from them, the Speaker and the deputies. Considering the constituencies that we have in the Gambia, some of them are large as 40,000 voters, some 60,000 voters, meaning that if you put 5 of that kind together, you are talking about 150,000 voters who has voted 5 MPs, but you have given that same 50,000 voters in the hands of one person to nominate them and occupy the position of the leadership in the National Assembly. That we think really will stifle the operations of the National Assembly because he's their appointee. They will be loyal to him no matter what. And yes, it's a fact that Gambians really need a constitution. But Gambians don't need any type of constitution. We want a constitution that is very progressive. Yes, the other side of the National Assembly have been flagging and chanting the term limit and 51 plus. That's a progressive. But that is not all that make a progressive constitution.
Honorable, you've mentioned something very, very interesting. And let me bring you back to that. Because given the continued reliance on the 1997 constitution, which lacks presidential term limit, what are the potential risks for the Gambia's democratic future in that case?
The 1997 constitution was here and there was no term limit. In 2016, Gambians came together and really changed the government. So if this current government wants to insist in bringing some of the clauses that Gambians don't want into the 2024 draft, and let me just tell you one thing about the whole issue of this 2024 draft. This is a draft that is made up under the leadership of the president at cabinet level. There are less than 20 people in this country. When they were done with their draft, as if they really want to force it on the Gambians, they did not give the opportunity to the Gambian population to have a look at it and critique it, give their opinions before. When they were done, they rose and gazetted it, meaning that Gambians would have no say at that point.
Some are of the view that if truly you want the Gambia to get a new constitution, what you could have done, you and your colleagues who voted to reject this promulgation bill, you could have allowed it to go to the scrutiny stage of, and that is the committee stage, which you lead. Why didn't you people accept that proposal to go to the committee stage so that you guys can compromise and ensure Gambia gets a new constitution?
Well, I can assure you the issue in the parliament is lack of trust on the two sides of the house. We have tested the side of the majority in a lot of bills that come to the parliament, and we allow it to go to constitution stage so that we can effect changes. And in those constitution stages, we were bullied by their number. For example, the anti-corruption bill was watered down to 0 because the most important clauses in that bill was expunged, even though we stood to say they must remain, but they used their numerical strength and then expunged all those important clauses in that bill. So we thought it is the same waste of time because they will do the same thing. And therefore, we don't want us to go there.
What's next for the Gambia in its quest for a new constitution that will stand the test of time?
Two things are possible. One, we can go back to the drawing board, re-examine the 1997 constitution as it comes on the 16th of January. Look at the differences with that constitution to the present day 1997 constitution, clause by clause, make a comparison and see what clauses were changed and what clauses were there before. Because the 1997 constitution, when it came out, it was good, but it was butchered, as some people say, 52 times. So if we look at the original text of 1997 constitution, compare it to the current one, then we would be able to see if it is the perfect one that was really butchered to be as bad as it is, we can carry on those amendments. The other way that we can do to really have a constitution that will serve the interests of all of us is after 1 month. Between that, the two sides of the parliament can go through this 2024 draft, clause by clause, to agree and disagree at the committee level. If we had a compromise at that committee level, this is not what we are now going to ask the government to bring, then if it comes, it will sail safely across the floors of the chambers.
Madi Sese is the National Assembly member for Serenkunda and the chairperson of the Human Rights and Constitutional Committee of the National Assembly. And anytime you hear that whistle, it tells you that it's time for sports, and the sportive Sankole Janko is here. Sankole, don't tell me that Ghana lost, I know.
Well, I'm starting with that. I'm sorry for you. Because Imo and I were having a discussion yesterday, and it turned out to be like that because reigning champion South Africa kick off their CAF, Women's Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON campaign style, securing a commanding 2-0 win over Ghana in their Group C opener. Despite growing into the game, Ghana returning to AFCON after missing the last edition were wasteful in front of goal. The Black Queens must regroup quickly as they face a tough Group C with Mali and Tanzania still to come. Elsewhere, Mali claimed a hard-fought 1-0 win over Tanzania in their CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations Group C opener in Barakan on Monday evening. Let's talk about some transfer news because Napoli have turned down a 60 million euros bid from Galatasaray for striker Victor Osimhen as the Turkish club makes an ambitious move for one of Europe's top forwards. And of course, defender Ala Aina of Nigeria signed a new contract with Nottingham Forest, extending his stay at the club until 2028. Yes.
Well, I can assure you that Ghana will come back. This is the first game in Group C. We will come back.
I don't want to comment much because, of course, I want the Black Queens to do well, but I'm sure Imo is celebrating somewhere.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but all the same, it's game. It's a game of football.
Of course, it is a game of football, and we hope that they will bounce back in their next counter. But it's going to be tough like this because they are going to meet against Mali as well as Tanzania. So let's pray.
I wish the Black Queens well.
Let's pray for them.
I wish them well. Anyway, and with that, we've come to the end of today's edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org live from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to Tufali Luso and Shekinjai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook at WADR English Service. I am Christopher Aticho. Good afternoon and enjoy the rest of our broadcast.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM.